Hello, this is Brain Builders. Often, when we think about the brain deteriorating, we wonder if there's a way that we can bolster the brain, that we can expand our reserve of brain cells. We all start losing brain cells when we're in our 20s. And if we have enough reserve built up from our young life and our young adult life, then we should be able to go well into our 80s and 90s and still live a very active, normal life. Um, when dementia is diagnosed, it's typically when a person gets down to 20% brain reserve. What that means is that if a normal person has 100% brain reserve and we start losing our brain reserve as we get older, we can get down to 50% brain reserve and still live a fairly normal life. Think about someone with kidney disease, and we talk about kidney function. If someone is born with two kidneys and we give up a kidney to donate to someone, or we lose a kidney to disease or something, we still are left with 50% kidney function. And we know that someone can live very normally with that amount of kidney function. But once it gets down to about 16% kidney function, then you're looking at dialysis. You don't have enough function to continue to living normally. And that's the same thing with brain function. When someone hits that threshold of 20% brain reserve left, that's when life starts to become difficult for them. They can't do all of the activities of daily living that they used to be able to do. Maybe the short-term memory is going and they're having some memory issues. Maybe they're having some logic issues and they're just not functioning, and they can't hide it anymore. We can, as we start to lose brain cells, even when we start to lose them very quickly, we can often compensate. The brain is an amazing organ, and we are able to compensate to a certain degree, and so that other people don't necessarily realize something is going on. But once a person gets past that 20% brain reserve threshold, they can't really compensate anymore, and their life starts to have some problems, and other people start to notice that something serious is going on. So what we want to do is continue through our lives to build more brain reserve, so that even if we do develop dementia and we are losing brain cells more quickly than we should normally, we still have that brain reserve to push back the point where we can't function as well in our lives. But just doing the same old thing every day doesn't build brain reserve. A lot of people say, well, I do crossword puzzles or I do Sudoku or whatever it is. But sometimes people get stuck on what they do really well. They really enjoy doing because they do it well. It's fun. They get through it. It's not hard work. But the thing that doesn't happen there is building the brain. In order to build the brain, you actually have to challenge the brain. If you have ever lifted weights or tried to build muscle, you know that you hear about when you're working out, you have to challenge the muscles. You can't do exactly the same thing all the time and expect to build muscle mass. You have to work different muscle groups. You have to work them very hard so that they tear and repair. That's what builds it. So when we're thinking about building brain reserve, that means you have to challenge yourself. You have to do something that's hard for your brain. And most of us like to do things that we like to do. When you think back about classes in school, I would have rather spent all my time in English class or literature class and not as much time in math or science. But it's the studying those things that we're not necessarily always good at that causes our brain mass to build. So we can't just say, well, I only want to do what's fun. I only want to do what I can handle really well, because that means we're not challenging ourselves and we're not going to add to that brain mass that we need to preserve our functioning later on. So one of the first things that I want to talk about, and it seems simple, but it seems maybe counterintuitive, But one of the biggest things that can help us build brain mass is being social. And you may know, as in the middle of a pandemic, that many of us are not able to be social, and many of us are feeling down. We might be experiencing depression. Social interaction is extremely important for human beings. And even people who are loners, there is still certainly social interaction that they want to engage in. So it's important for us to create some type of social interaction, even in these times that are difficult, whether it's through Zoom like this, where you can virtually talk with your friends, talking on the phone, even texting can be interaction. But being social is something that helps people maintain their brain reserve. There was a big study that was done where they took a large group of people and they divided them in half, and they did cognitive testing on everyone pre-experiment. And then they took half of the group and they had them do brain exercises, brain teasers, the kinds of things that we think, working on certain problems or whatever are going to build brain. But they took the other half and they just had them have conversations with each other. So when they came back together after the experiment, they did the cognitive testing again. And the group that did the brain teasers and the hard work that they thought they were working their brain did not do as well on the second round of cognitive testing as the people who were social. And so there's something really, really important and brain building about being social and being connected to other people. So when we think about being social, we think spending time with family and friends, and if it can't be in person right now, we have to work on other ways that we can make this happen. And certainly by now, most of you have been able to do some kind of virtual visiting, whether it's Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever some of these other things are. It's important to maintain that, to keep doing that, even if it's just one-on-one. But groups are another good thing. Being interested in someone else's life, hearing about what's going on in someone else's life, being able to participate in someone else's life. Maybe you have some advice to give to someone, you have something to learn from someone else. That back and forth is really good for people to keep them connected. There are virtual clubs that you can join. There are virtual book clubs and just chatting and things like that that would be important to look into. Discussing current events, what's going on in your city, keeping track of what's going on in your neighborhood. These are all kinds of things, that ways that people can be social and know what's going on. Meet a friend and go for a walk outside. It's not that bad out in the winter. You want to go when the roads are dry, the sidewalks are dry, but you can bundle up and get outside, get some fresh air. It's okay to be around people, at a slight distance when you're outside. Wear your mask, don't be changing air, but being able to connect with other people is the thing that we're looking for here. Another way to build brain mass is through reading and writing. A lot of us are binge watching TV, and that can be interesting and fun, and it can pass the time, but it's not as brain building as writing and reading. When you read a novel and your brain has to read the words, picture things in your mind, interpret what you're reading, make sense out of it, that's a lot more brain activity than just sitting and watching a television screen as the story unfolds. But also the act of writing. And a lot of us don't write too much anymore. We don't write letters. We don't handwrite a lot of things. But the action of handwriting, using your hands to do things, has been shown to be brain building. So if we can write letters to people by hand, I actually wrote out Christmas cards this year and sent them first time in ages and ages. But another way is to use the journaling activity. This could be either, a diary form, just writing down what has happened every day. It could be like a gratitude journal. What are you happy for? What are you thankful for? In a way to ease depression that you might be experiencing through the pandemic. But this act of writing something down, you can use it in a lot of different ways. You can maybe use it as part of your nighttime routine. Maybe you want to write down issues that you've been experiencing during the day. If you are a caregiver, maybe you want to write down some of the problems that are bothering you through caregiving. Maybe you've had some successes in caregiving that you want to celebrate. So those are good things to write down. But writing down feelings and activities and things that have gone on during the day is a good way to ease your mind, unload your mind, but you're doing that work with your hand, small motor activities that can be brain building. Reading for pleasure, but also reading to learn something. So when they talk about brain building, keeping your brain young and agile, it's learning something. We don't always want to just be reading soap opera novels or history novels or something like that, but maybe there's a subject you want to learn more about. Maybe you want to learn more about dementia by reading a book about dementia. Maybe you want to learn more about nutrition by reading some books about diet and nutrition and how this all plays into brain health. That's a great way to learn new things, keep your brain active, work on reading and interpreting and understanding through the written word. And then there's practicing new skills. So everybody has hobbies. Most people have hobbies. Some people watching TV is their hobby, but most people have some kind of hobby. Maybe you have gotten away from your hobbies. Maybe, you know, life has been busy or you've been distracted or you're caregiving and you haven't been spending time with hobbies. But doing something like that can be brain building, especially if it's trying something new. Maybe you are a person who knows how to crochet, but you don't know how to knit. Learning how to knit could give you a brain benefit. Maybe it's the other way around. You know how to knit, but you've never crocheted. Maybe we get into this pattern where we like to do what we're really good at. So maybe there's one stitch that you do all the time. You make all kinds of things with this one stitch because you're so good at it, you don't even have to really think about it. But right there is the key. If it's not something you have to think about, then it's not giving you that brain building benefit. So it's the really having to think about something and figure it out that causes your brain to work and gives you that boost. So it could be lots of different things. Maybe you like gardening. And through the winter, if you don't have an indoor garden, how could you use that hobby to build your brain? Maybe you could take a course. Maybe you want to try a master gardening class where you really learn about different things. Maybe it's not stuff that you're really going to use all the time, but that doesn't mean there's no benefit in it. We used to think about classes in school and, you know, I don't see how I'm ever going to use this in real life. Well, maybe there was more benefit to that in building brain mass than using it in real life. But because we struggled with something and we worked hard to learn something, that made our brain bigger, added more brain cells. What about something like a musical instrument? If you play piano, but you can just sit at the piano and just play and play and play and it flows out and you don't even have to think about it, that can be soothing and enjoyable and wonderful, but it's not necessarily brain building. In order for it to be brain building, you have to challenge yourself. Learn new music, learn a new piece, learn something that's more difficult that you never thought you'd be able to do. Or maybe you don't know how to play piano, but you always wanted to. Well, now could be the time to try to learn that. It's not something that we expect we're going to become proficient at even, but that's not the point. It's going through the process of the learning, of the struggling, of the working hard at it that builds the brain. Learning to type. Things that you do with your hands relate directly to the brain. So when we're talking about musical instruments, playing the piano uses both hands. There's lots of instruments that you play that use both hands to play the notes. Those are really brain boosting. And we talk about how kids who are in music class in school, they are often better at math. There's a lot of things in music class that there's counting, there's division, so you're learning fractions and those kinds of things, but you're also often using both hands and both hands doing different things. You know, to have both of your hands do the same thing at the same time, that's easy. We don't have to think about it. But to have your two hands do different things at the same time, that's a little bit harder. So if you already play a musical instrument, maybe you want to pick up a different musical instrument. Maybe you've played a woodwind. Learning to play a brass instrument might be a little bit more difficult, or maybe the other way around. Whatever seems, something out of your past, something that you used to enjoy could bring new enjoyment, but also challenge. And that's what we want to keep going is the challenge. So learning to type is one of those things that fits in there. A lot of people, we have a lot of hunters and peckers, but what if you learn to type with the correct fingers on the correct keys? You're using both hands, your fingers are moving independently, your hands are moving independently of each other. That could be a skill that might make your whole computing a little bit easier, but it might also just be a good challenge for you, even if that's not what you use when you really type an email or something like that. You go back to your hunt and peck, but causing challenge. Other hobbies like fishing. Maybe you've never tried anything like fly fishing. People make lures out of different kinds of things, and you're using your hands. You're being creative. You're learning to tie different knots. It could be challenging. So think about what some of your hobbies are. Maybe woodworking is something that you really like to do, but maybe you do a specific thing. Maybe you have a specific tool that you use a lot, you're very good at. What about getting something different, branching out, learning how to do a different technique? That could be very brain building. When it comes to language, we always hear them say, learn a new language. Yeah, because when you're trying to learn a new language as an older person, it's a lot harder. But there's the key, the challenge. Learning to do something that is different and difficult is what is going to build the brain. So, it could just be not that you actually expect to become fluent in a language, but maybe you just want to learn the different words, the different language for words, different cupboards, cups, dishes, utensils, those kinds of things. What is it in French? What is it in Spanish? Can I remember this? Label things, make flashcards, make a game out of it. Do you have a grandchild who's learning another language? Maybe you can quiz each other and learn that way. There gives you some social interaction as well as exercising your brain. But what about just really for fun hobbies? What's something that you've wanted to try but never did? Maybe you'd like to learn how to sculpt or paint or draw or even cooking. Cooking can be an art form. Um, Okay, so you're stuck at home. There's YouTube. You can learn how to do anything on YouTube. I mean, literally anything. My husband has fixed the furnace. He's fixed the air conditioner. We've learned how to do Zoom and all these different kinds of things from YouTube videos. Pull up some videos on how to cook something, how to paint. These are things that you can do at home alone when you're on lockdown. You can't go out to different classes like that, but it's something that could stretch you. You just never know what might be inside, what might click, what you might enjoy. And another thing is trying to do everyday things with your non-dominant hand. That means if you're right-handed, put your pen in your left hand and try to write. If you've ever had surgery on your dominant hand, broken it, it's in a cast, you can't write, and you've had to do things like brush your teeth or brush your hair or do makeup or write or something like that with your non-dominant hand, you know that it can be very challenging. That's because your brain is so programmed to doing everything with the dominant hand that you don't have to think about it anymore. Something like brushing your teeth. We don't really think about that. We can do all kinds of other things while we're brushing our teeth. We can plan lists. We can, walk around the house and take care of other things because we don't have to think about that. But if you try it with your non-dominant hand, it's going to be a lot slower, a lot clumsier, but you have to think about it. That is the secret. That's where the brain building takes place. You can actually build brain cells by brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. So that's something to keep in mind, something you can build into your everyday life. Try eating with your non-dominant hand, dealing cards with your non-dominant hand. Just stop and think about that. Oh, let me do it this way and see how weird and clumsy but how much better you can get at it after you've done it for a while. I want to show you a little trick about using your two hands together. Mostly we can do the same thing with both hands. That means, we go back to the patting the head and rubbing. See, as soon as I go around with my hand on my stomach, my hand on my head wants to go around too. When you do two different movements with your hands, you really have to think about it. And here's a simple one I want to show you. Okay, if we go with your index finger on your thumb, you can easily run through all your fingers back and forth because they're doing the same thing. But if you try going with the index finger and pinky finger and now run through the fingers, it's much more deliberate and it's much more difficult. I really have to think about it. And when I'm talking and trying to do it, that's very distracting. So even something as simple as this, when we're doing the same fingers, we can do it very quickly and they're very coordinated and together. But when we're doing it with different fingers, it takes a little bit more time. That's the key. Whatever you can create for yourself to do that is more difficult, that you have to stop and think about it. Things like vacuuming. When I vacuum with my left hand, I have to really pay attention. My body just doesn't work as well as it does if I'm vacuuming with my right hand. But that's where the brain building comes in. So these are the things that you can work into your regular day. How about playing some games? Some people are really good at Scrabble, and some people are really good at Yahtzee. Some people are good with words and letters and creating that way. Other people are good at mental math. If we are not good at mental math, we tend to stay away from things like Yahtzee. Let's play Scrabble. So the key here is to play the game that's less comfortable. If you have young grandchildren that you could share this kind of a game with and play with them, play the thing that you're not as comfortable with. That's where you're going to struggle more. That's where you're going to have to think harder. And it might not be as fun. And we want to have fun in life. But if we're thinking about being able to build brain mass, to make ourselves healthier, to build in more protection for down the road, that's our goal here. So if it's a little bit uncomfortable for a time and that's okay. That hard work is good, is part of it. If we're thinking about people who already have dementia and we want to try to build brain mass for them, there's not a lot of, there's really no evidence that if someone has suffered brain damage that you can reverse that. But it doesn't mean that you can't continue to build some kind of brain mass that will help slow what's going on. And so for them, it's the same kind of things. They might not be able to learn something new. They might not be able to learn to play chess, but they could play checkers. If there are things that they can play, games like that, we don't want people to be frustrated to the point, you know, where they're unhappy doing something because they can't do it. But letting them do things that they can do is a good thing, is exercising, but also with them using their hands. The key is using your hands. So it might be some kind of twiddle game, something that they can manipulate with their hands, a puzzle that they can work with their hands and try to figure things out. There's these brain path discs that people can trace with their fingers, braille bumps. The stimulation that we give to the fingertips is brain building for people who have dementia. They might not be able to figure out a crossword puzzle or play Scrabble or play Yahtzee. They might lose the sense of what the numbers and the letters mean. But if they can do things with their hands, sculpting with Play-Doh or regular clay or therapy putty, something like that, you know, ask them to create something, make a ball, make a snake, make a worm, make a dog. So, you know, they're using their brain to do something that they've not been used to doing. They're using both of their hands while they're doing it. That can be brain activity for people who are living with dementia. And also think about the other arts, painting. There's just amazing evidence about people who have dementia, have never painted before, but amazingly creative things that they are able to create. So for you, for the loved one that you're caring for, it's new things, things that you haven't been exposed to before. These are brain stimulating, using your hands to do and create things, doing things that are not something that you're used to doing all the time, that causes brain building. So these are things that we can work into our everyday lives. Every day you can challenge yourself to do something with your non-dominant hand. Every day you can challenge yourself to learn something, whether it's the word of the day calendar, or increase your vocabulary, switch to learning in Spanish or French or German, expanding your foreign language vocabulary, but just something to keep yourself challenged, learning something new, reading and writing, playing a musical instrument. Again, it's challenging, something a little bit difficult, but still might be something that you enjoy being able to master in a simple way. So just like building your muscle mass, you got to switch it up, you got to challenge yourself, and that's what's going to be the building process.